Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rom.
In our top story, Benjamin Netanyahu has slammed the New York Times for shamefully calling to undermine Israel's elected government. The incoming Israeli Prime Minister said that the publication has demonized Israel for decades and systematically buried the Holocaust on its back pages. The leader of the Likud party was responding to a scandalous New York Times article entitled "The Ideal of Democracy in a Jewish State is in Jeopardy." The piece claimed that while the recent Israeli elections were fair and democratic, the coalition of right-wing and religious parties poses a threat to democratic values. The Times board wrote that the incoming Israeli government is a significant threat to the future of Israel, its direction, its security, and even the idea of a Jewish homeland. Netanyahu responded saying the New York Times continues to delegitimize the one true democracy in the Middle East and America's best ally in the region.
Iran has been expelled from the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. The resolution to boot the hardline Islamic Republic from the premier UN body for empowering women was proposed by the United States and passed by a majority vote of 29 in favor, 8 against, and 16 abstentions. Linda Thomas-Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said Iran's membership on the panel is an ugly stain on the Commission's credibility. Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Gilad Erdan, addressed the council, saying the Iranian regime does not care about its people, it only cares about its own survival. Speaking in Farsi, the national language of Iran, Erdan repeated the slogan of the resistance, "Women, Life, Freedom." And he said Israelis salute the bravery of the Iranian people, and we view ourselves as their true allies.
A Palestinian terrorist who was involved in a plot to assassinate a prominent Israeli rabbi was deported last week to France. Salah Hamouri served 7 years in an Israeli prison for the assassination attempt on Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He was released in 2011 along with 1,027 other terrorists in a prisoner exchange deal for captured Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit. Hamouri's continued involvement in terror activities led to his rearrest in March. In October, Israel's former Interior Minister, Ayelet Shaked, ruled to revoke Hamouri's residency rights. The terrorist was deported last week and was met in Paris with banners of Palestinian flags and a cheering crowd.
Israel has evacuated its citizens from Peru after a wave of deadly riots left the Israelis cut off in a remote area. Violent protests raged nationwide after the president of the South American country was ousted following his attempt to dissolve the parliament and rule by decree. The riots caused food shortages and major transportation closures, leaving thousands of tourists stranded. A state of emergency has been declared for the entire country. Israel's foreign ministry released a warning regarding travel to Peru and cautioned Israelis already there to avoid the demonstrations as well as crowded places.
Israel's National Intelligence Agency, or the Mossad, has revealed how Israel's most famous spy was caught by Syrian authorities in 1965. Eli Cohen infiltrated the upper echelons of the Syrian army by hosting lavish parties for security officials and passing their secrets to the fledgling Jewish state. He transmitted intelligence crucial to Israel's security, saving thousands of lives. Eli Cohen's capture and subsequent execution in Damascus was a national tragedy, and historians have long debated how he was caught. David Barnea, the director of the Mossad, recently revealed that Cohen's last communication, which detailed a meeting between Syrian President Amin al-Hafitz and the military high command, was intercepted by Damascus officials. Cohen was arrested shortly after sending that transmission.
The United States is calling for an investigation into a deadly automobile accident in which 2 Arab brothers were killed by an Israeli driver. Now, despite turning a blind eye to a wave of vehicular terror attacks against Israelis, the U.S. Embassy's Office of Palestinian Affairs is demanding that Israel investigate the recent car crash that claimed the lives of the siblings. The victims were attempting to repair their car on the side of a dimly lit highway when they were struck by an oncoming vehicle. The Israel police released a statement saying the broken-down automobile did not have its lights on and the Israeli driver did not see the men. Israel has been plagued with intentional vehicular rammings and attempted Palestinian terror attacks, and the Biden administration's decision to demand an investigation into the recent accident is seen as biased and highly unusual.
The Jewish state has announced that it will host the first ever Abraham Accords esports peace games. The event will celebrate the newly formed ties with several Arab states resulting from historic peace agreements, which were brokered by former U.S. President Donald Trump. Participants from Israel, the United States, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and other special guests will compete in the games, which will be hosted in Tel Aviv. Tom Nides, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, said that the event will show the power of sports to bring people together in the new Middle East.
An Irish member of the United Nations interim force in Lebanon was killed and 3 members of his team were injured when their convoy was blocked and ambushed by local Lebanese villagers. The Irish military released a statement confirming that 2 armored utility vehicles carrying 8 personnel came under small arms fire. Witnesses said the convoy was on a standard administrative run to Beirut. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney said the hostile mob surrounded one of the vehicles, trapping the UNIFIL troops. Then they were fired on, leaving their convoy riddled with bullets. There are currently about 10,000 UNIFIL troops stationed along the Lebanese-Israeli border. They are tasked with guarding the boundary between the 2 countries, which remain in a state of war. Hezbollah, the Iranian proxy army which rules Lebanon, views the UNIFIL deployment as a violation of its sovereignty and claims that it serves Israel's interest.
Jews around the world will light the last candles of the Hanukkah holiday on Sunday night. The 8-day Festival of Lights was marked with family gatherings where Jews served traditional Hanukkah foods such as fried potato pancakes or latkes and donuts or sufganiyot. Communal candlelighting in Jewish communities was enhanced by large and festive Hanukkah installations. In Tel Aviv, patrons at the Dizengoff Center attempted to break the Guinness Book of World Records by building the world's largest Hanukkah made from Lego blocks. The Chabad Lubavitch organization erected more than 15,000 Hanukkah menorahs in 100 countries worldwide. In New York City, the group set up the world's largest Hanukkah. The 9-branched candelabra, designed by Israeli artist Yaakov Agam, is 36 feet tall and has become a New York City holiday icon.
A new archaeological discovery is being hailed as the greatest find since the Dead Sea Scrolls. Archaeologists have deciphered several new royal inscriptions of King Hezekiah, which predate the Qumran text by hundreds of years. Using high-resolution photography, Professor Gershon Galil has decrypted dozens of lines of text which were written 2,731 years ago. These etchings, found in the tunnels under the city of David in Jerusalem, describe King Hezekiah's reign and his construction of the Siloam Tunnel and Pool. The inscriptions note the exact date that this amazing architectural feat was completed, on the 17th day of the Hebrew month of Tammuz, in the 17th year of the biblical king's reign in 709 before the Common Era. Well, so far, 7 inscriptions of King Hezekiah have been discovered in the city of David, and they are constantly uncovering more proof of the Bible and the ancient Jewish connection to Jerusalem at the site. Christians are preparing for the holiday of Christmas, and the Yuletide cheer is visible throughout Israel. The Jewish state is the only place in the Middle East that Christianity is growing and thriving. More than 100,000 Christian tourists joined the Israeli Christian community to celebrate in the Holy Land this year. The Christian quarter of the Old City of Jerusalem was lit up, and hundreds of the city's residents attended the official tree lighting ceremony. The Jerusalem municipality traditionally hands out free Christmas trees to its Christian residents, distributed by a Santa Claus riding a camel. The municipality of Nazareth erected what it claims to be the largest Christmas tree in the Middle East, and the cities of Haifa and Jaffa have heavily invested in decorating their towns for the holiday. We at Israel Now News would like to wish all of our viewers around the world a very happy, healthy holiday season and a Merry Christmas from Jerusalem.
That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein and we're here in our beautiful studio in Jerusalem. My guest today is Steve Linde. He's the editor-in-chief of the Jerusalem Report. Steve, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Steve, tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Jerusalem Report.
The Jerusalem Report is a magazine that comes out every 2 weeks. We publish it here in Israel, but we have subscribers all over the world, including in North America. 80% of our subscribers are in North America. And we try to cater to the international Jewish community and Christian community and other people who are interested in Israel, focusing on Israel, the Jewish world, and the Middle East.
You know, one of the things that really stands out when I speak to you is that you have a really good acumen for what's happening here politically. Ahead of the election, you were pretty spot on what you thought was going to happen. There's a lot of talk about this new government that came in. Benjamin Netanyahu is now Prime Minister. They say it's a right-wing government. What policies do you think are going to change from the past government?
You mean from the outgoing so-called change government?
Yes.
Well, you know, I think the Israeli electorate went to the polls and basically voted for a new old government. I call it the alt-neu government because we've done it all before, except this really is a different kind of government. In fact, thank God, in these fifth elections in just under 4 years, we finally have a clear outcome so that we don't have to worry, I think, about going to the polls again very soon. And we spent way too much money, time, and effort into new elections. But I think, Netanyahu has certainly had the experience. He's the longest serving Israeli prime minister in history, almost 15 years in office. And I think that this government, because he's finding himself in the strange predicament of being maybe the most left-wing member of what, as you call, a center-right government, it's not a comfortable position for him, as I know him. He likes to play the responsible adult between left and right, extremes. He's always the moderate voice. And now he's finding himself, I think, pretty much on the left of a right-wing government. So I think it might be in his interest to expand the coalition at some point in the future. Whether that'll actually happen, I don't know. At the moment, it looks like he has a pretty stable coalition of 64 Knesset members in the 120 seat Knesset, and I think he's here to stay. At least it seems to me this may be his last term as prime minister, but never say never, especially with Netanyahu in Israel.
So what are the three main issues facing Israel today? You know, when Israelis think about when they went to the polls a few months ago or last month, what was the main issues on their mind? I think it depends who you talk to, obviously, but most polls show that Israelis are very concerned with their pockets, with the economy and rising inflation. I think, we'll see how this government handles it. And hopefully it'll handle it better than it has in the past, because we're seeing all kinds of rising prices in Israel, like housing for young people is impossible, especially in places like Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. I think security is always on the top of Israeli minds. We've seen a rise in terrorist attacks in the last few months, and hopefully this government will be able to find a way to put a stop to this. And the third thing that I think is important, although other people may not, is relations between Israel and the diaspora, the Jewish community elsewhere. And I think a lot of work needs to be done there. Not just fighting anti-Semitism, but working together to get things back on track. It's interesting you bring up the diaspora. It's polarized here with Israeli Jews and American Jews specifically, more so than other diasporas around there. What do you think can be done to try to bring those two communities back together?
Well, I do think there's a growing rift between the diaspora and Israel. And, in the past, it's always been the diaspora Jewry helping Israel, giving money to Israel, supporting Israel. I think it's almost time to switch the equation, and we should be now helping them. We've certainly seen, Israel help Jews in Ukraine and Russia make Aliyah in the last year, because of the war there. Helping American Jewry sounds ridiculous, but I do think American Jewry needs help, not necessarily financially, but they need to know that we're all on the same side here. We may be on different sides of the ocean, but we're all together as a Jewish community, and we should be in this boat fighting together, fighting things like anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiments, which is the new anti-Semitism. But I also think we need to provide American Jewry with some kind of strengthening, boosting of their Jewish identity. In the past, we brought groups here with Birthright and Taglit and whatever. I think we need to find other ways maybe for us to go there and engage in American Jewry and help them fight anti-Israel sentiment, anti-Jewish sentiment, not just in America, but all over the world.
There are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
Well, firstly, I think it's really good that you're watching this show. It's one of my favorite shows, and Josh is one of my favorite people. But I think my pitch is basically that we really do need to stand together, especially when it comes to Israel. There's nothing worse than being polarized and split when you're facing strong enemies like Iran, for example. It's really important that we stand united, that we stand together, and that we realize that the Jewish people are one people with Christian support, with Muslim support, with support from others, but we really do need to stand together. As my friend Michael Siegel put it, it's when we start fighting each other that temples get destroyed.
Thank you, Steve, for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, the return to Zion with Karen Hayesod.
Shalom and welcome to the Return to Zion with Karen Hayesod, United Israel Appeal. I'm Sam Grunberg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod, the leading official fundraising organization for the State of Israel. The story of the Ethiopian Jews returning to their homeland have moved people around the world. Let's listen to the story of two individuals who are making a profound difference. God bless you from Jerusalem.
A mission to Ethiopia. Through their deep faith, Roy and Yuklin Chen, a devout Bible-believing Christian couple from Hong Kong, received a sign from heaven, revealing their personal mission in life. They found it in an amazing series of inspired events that took them on a transformative spiritual journey along a road strewn with signs and wonders to help realize God's promise to return the exiled people of Israel back to their ancestral homeland.
In 2006, on November the 11th at 5 o'clock in the morning, the Lord woke me up and started to tell me to look up different books, chapter 11, verse 11, which is that He will bring His children from all corners of the world back home, including places like Cush. After we found out that Cush is Ethiopia and was praying, meditating on Psalm 87, suddenly the Lord says, bring the Ethiopian Jews back.
They traveled all the way from Hong Kong to Ethiopia, where they were joined by Eliezer Moody Sandberg, World Chairman of Karen Hayesod, who is tasked with bringing the rest of the Ethiopian Jews back to Israel.
After 2 years of hearing from God, a specific assignment that we now have a chance to actually participate in something so historically significant. We felt the Lord telling us to actually meet with the remaining Ethiopian Jews, to encourage them, to remind them that Father God, Abba, has not forgotten them, but that in His perfect time, He will bring them back, His sons and daughters.
The Lord says, stop everything and write everything down. And He gave us Isaiah 17, 18, and 19. And then He says, call the world 777. We didn't understand what it meant. This year is the year 5777. So we wondered whether this is the year that we are to call the world to support the Aliyah of the Velash Mura and of the other lost tribes.
The Israeli government has just authorized the movement of, at the time, the last batch of Ethiopian Jews back to Israel. And the operation was going to be called Operation Wings of the Dove. This is the piece of jewelry that I picked up for my wife. And the name of the operation was called the Wings of the Dove. I showed it to everyone at the meeting, and everyone was totally shocked. All of us started to weep. This was a divine appointment.
Inspired by the Ethiopian Jewish community's love for the God, state, and people of Israel, this journey strengthened their determination to fulfill this biblical prophecy and inspire others to help bring an exile of almost 3,000 years to a final close.
We feel very blessed to be here with you because we were sent to come here. We just want to make an appeal if we can and ask that you, as you watch this and hear our story, that you would also first pray for the Ethiopian Jews, that they would be able to be brought back quickly, safely, and that secondly, whether God has called you also to support this movement.
We have visited their camp in Gondor. Many of them have died while waiting to go home.
Together, we will bring all our brothers and sisters back to Jerusalem. Toda Rabba. Thank you very much.
Thus said the Lord God, Behold, I will lift up my hand to the nations, and set up my standard to the peoples. And they will bring your sons into their bosom, and your daughters will be carried on their shoulders. Isaiah chapter 49, verse 22.
Let's bless Israel together.
To donate and get information, visit khisrael.org.
And now, shining light from Israel.
The story of David and Goliath is one that has fired the imaginations of billions of people around the world. And while reading the story in the Bible is riveting, it remains just that, a story. To gain a better understanding of what happened, you actually have to come to where the events took place. And that's what brings us here today, to Tel Azeka. These trail markers aren't just here to help us get to the top of the mountain. They're here to help us immerse ourselves into the biblical narrative. Each one is engraved with a single verse. As we walk by, they take us deeper and deeper into the drama that unfolded here thousands of years ago. This is part of an ongoing archaeological excavation of the ancient city of Azeka, which was one of the most important fortified cities in the late First Temple period. Archaeologists have already found remnants of a city wall as well as a fortress, which helps us understand what we've already learned from other archaeological finds in nearby Lachish, that Azeka wasn't some small town hamlet. Rather, it was a strategically important city that was fortified against enemy attacks. As we're climbing up, we're already getting these beautiful views behind me. We're looking towards the west, which is the land of the Philistines. And it was from that direction that the Philistine forces were coming and encroaching on Israelite territory. Between us and the next mountain is an area called Ephes Damim, which is a red line past which King Saul would never allow the Philistines to pass. I am just in awe of the beauty of this view, as well as the historical weight that it carries with it. These markers are a little bit bigger because they also serve as benches where we can sit and listen to the climax of the story. From here, we have a beautiful view of the valley where there was supposed to be a battle between the Israelites and the Philistines, but it ended up being a one-on-one showdown between David and Goliath. Let's go have a look. Behind me is the Valley of Elah. Valleys like this were used for agriculture in the biblical period, but sometimes they were also used for battles, and that's exactly what was supposed to happen between the Israelite forces and the Philistine forces. But the Philistines had their secret weapon, Goliath, a giant who was anywhere between 9 and 15 feet tall, depending on how you measure a cubit. He would come out into the valley issuing a challenge, but no one was brave enough to take up the call. Until David, who wasn't even in the army at the time, and he heard Goliath's challenge. And it made David furious. And he went down into the valley and he gathered up 5 smooth stones and faced the giant without any armor. Goliath, furious, started to run at David, at which point David took out a stone, put it into his sling, and threw it at the giant's head. Goliath fell face down. David came, took his sword, and cut Goliath's head off with his own sword. At that point, the Philistine forces were so afraid of what they had seen that they fled all the way back to their territory. Today, the valley is being used for agriculture once again, just as it was thousands of years ago. What's even more remarkable are the communities that are behind us, housing thousands and thousands of Jews returning to their biblical homeland. The story of Tel Azeka, while famous, is just one story here in the Elah Valley. There are dozens of other stories to be heard in this region of the Holy Land, not to mention everywhere else in the country. I'm going to go and explore some of those places to connect to my biblical heritage. We would love it if you would come and explore with us.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Rebecca Roberts.
And I'm Yochanan El Rome, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.